in the healthcare industry, and there's lots of opportunity for disruption. So the pandemic really broke things wide open, right? And all of a sudden we see new technologies advancing, and an area that sometimes is a little bit recession proof as well. So those of us who have worked in this space know that there are just some incredible technologies coming forward. So today the panel is going to focus on delivery of healthcare, but also research, both clinical and preclinical investment in this sector, and then hopefully touch a little bit on healthcare policy as well. So my name is Shelly O'Donovan. I teach persuasive communication at the Wharton School. I also own my own company where I go in mostly to pharma and medical device companies, and I train them all around communication. My sweet spot is body language, nonverbal communication, and helping people to really take their deals and level their communication up to the next level. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to my panel to have them introduce themselves. So Thomas, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Shelly. My name is Thomas Farb. I'm currently CEO of Bioscience, where we're automating live cell imaging, an area that has really been neglected yet is critically important for drug discovery, for delivery of therapeutics. I've started 18 companies. This is my 18th. I've had 7 unicorns. 3 were in AI and 4 in life sciences. And generally, these companies combine many different fields. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Albert Yuen, 20-year in asset management and banking. I was headed up the life sciences investment portfolio for the Rockefellers for about a decade before in New York City here, and before moving on to emerging and developing markets, and then into family office advisory and investments. HRN, which is my firm, is a multifamily office platform, investing in life sciences, real estate, as well as selective tech investments. And we are actually quite excited and happy to announce that we recently closed an investment into Thrive Biosciences, Tom's company here. And yeah, we're very excited about that, actually. And thanks for having me on the panel.
My name is John Abelis. I am a physician by training and also a pharmacologist, both from the University of Birmingham. After my hospital training in the UK, I'm originally from Rhodesia, now unfortunately Zimbabwe. I went into the pharmaceutical industry. I was recruited into an American company in the UK. From there, I was recruited to Pfizer in New York in 73. And I was associate medical director there and graduated up to medical director in developing drugs and also communications with marketing and planning. From there, I became the first doctor full-time on Wall Street as an analyst in the pharma arena with Peter Peabody. That lasted some very happy years, after which I started to work. They kept me off counsel, and I went out to California, started work with emerging biotech, biopharma companies like Genentech and Cetus. Stayed 10 years in the Bay Area, then moved to Florida in 93, where I still am domiciled. I have a place here in New York and in Connecticut, and I am involved in promulgation of early stage medical companies across the board in terms of med tech and biopharma, but my main focus is in biopharma therapeutics now. And I am engaged. I have helped dozens of companies. I've started several of them. My family office is continuing to work with emerging companies, 3 or 4 of them that I am the founder. And I am also now engaged in putting together a BDC or a public traded closed-end fund that will make signal investments in the immunology arena, which is a big focus of mine. Immunology being a rapidly growing and very essential science to solve many disease areas. And I'm calling that group, I've already incorporated, it's going to be called Immunition, which I coined the name of. and will make substantial controlling interest in a group of immunology-based companies who have gotten past their point of proof of concept and are now in various areas of disease, but share with each other skill sets and ideas in terms of their immunological science basis.
Thank you. So I wonder for my panelists what trends you're seeing in healthcare right now and how that should impact the investment decisions. So Tom, we'll start with you.
So major trends in healthcare and the impact on investment. So I know it's widely cited, but certainly telemedicine and telehealth. But I encourage people to look at the many segments that are within that. I mean, there's patient engagement, there's patient compliance, there's remote monitoring. So there are a lot of opportunities that have been accelerated as a result of COVID-19. And that is generating more and new data, which is another important trend, which is after decades and much efforts and things like EHRs and electronic lab notebooks, things like that, we're actually generating sort of huge amounts of data. Because of COVID-19, a lot of that has actually been more fungible. In other words, it's been shared among sectors, even among countries. Second, I think there's a trend of patient-friendly medicine. Consumers are demanding more. You're seeing more concierge health, but also technology platforms that are patient-friendly. And by the way, what's patient-friendly is often doctor-friendly and leads to better medicine, which is always a great combination. There's an increasing trend, which is fantastic, towards treating chronic diseases, behavioral diseases. I think some of that comes from the risk factors that were identified as a result of COVID-19, and also a greater focus on prevention, which has been long in coming. AI, which is also on everybody's list. But again, there are many different segments that can be explored. There's drug design. Actually, I met Marty, a company at in Miami at one of your forums, EVQLV, which generates multiple new antibody hits, far beyond what's been done with biology, and what takes so long with biology, it's done with data. AI and behavioral is important, recognizing speech patterns perhaps that are suicide, high potential. And then actionable diagnostics using AI, not just to diagnose, but figure out next step.
I have some comments and three comments actually. So one is there's a bifurcation in healthcare. Can you guys discuss the healthcare bifurcation? You can just repeat that. So there's a bifurcation in healthcare, and I think Tom just brought it up with the advent of all of these concierge practices that are out there. You're just leaving. So a doctor has 1,000 patients or 3,000 patients and takes the top 300 and charges them $5,000 a year, right? So that's number one, the bifurcation. Number two, people don't realize it, but most doctors, concierge doctors today, they use an AI product to write their notes. So there's a product that was developed, but they didn't say they tested on doctors and their patients, and the patients signed confidentiality. Everybody signed confidentiality agreements. And a bunch of doctors in India trained the AI on diagnosis and note writing. So all the notes many of the notes that are written, the doctors pay $800 a month to subscribe to this service, and the AI writes their notes from them and makes recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So if we talk about that kind of issue in AI, and then third, we just had a guy come to us with two big things. A lot of nurses left practice and they become traveling nurses. They're making 3 times as much money. So the big need for greater utilization of staff, like optimal utilization. Can you talk about optimal utilization of staff? Right. And then the other thing is that there's an AI product now that says that it's going to be on your cell phone. It's going to be able to do diagnostics from your cell phone, from video. it's not gonna be 100% accurate, but it's gonna tell you to go see your doctor. So 4 questions, so.
So Marty asked 4 questions. I was taking notes, so Shelly, maybe.
Right.
So trends that he's identified, he'd like us to comment on are, bifurcation within healthcare, and I think Marty and I agree. The concierge medicine is an example of that, but the bifurcation that's for the people, the top few percent that can afford. Marty, I would also say that the other side, as you say, is bifurcation. There has been an increased focus on those who are disadvantaged in the medical system. Not a lot, but there has been an increase, and I think part of that again is kind of COVID-19. We're all we're all connected. I think the trends you mentioned are actually all kind of related. Second one is AI products actually already exist to do things like to write notes and increase efficiency. And certainly any trend where efficiency is increased is important. Third, better utilization of medical personnel. So things like traveling nurses.
Because there's a huge shortage of nurses right now. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but it's massive.
Yeah, and that has been here for a long time, Marty. Obviously, as you know, and I don't see a lot of companies that focus on nurses specifically. I suspect there's a lot of good solutions there. I may have to start another company. Well, I have some investors in here, and HRN just invested. I'm going to be spending the next few years at Thrive. I think, was there a 4th one I missed? I'm sorry.
Doctor Strand using
There's a diagnostic AI tool that's coming out in the next year
Right.
that can do, can kind of like monitor your blood pressure using cameras.
Right. So yeah. So diagnostics. An example Marty gave, kind of remote monitoring, which is a great use. And I agree with you. My first trend is telemedicine, telehealth, and examples are remote monitoring. A lot of these things are being combined, like your example, Marty. So it's remote monitoring with with AI. So there's a lot of fusion. I would say it is the trend.
Excellent. So, Albert, I'm going to pass it over to you and ask you, what do you see as the best areas for investment in healthcare right now? Given all the,
And I think just maybe even expanding upon Marty's question and some of Tom's comments. I mean, and expanding on this AI theme that we've hit upon, I think it's really interesting because I think a lot of the worries have been AI replacing humans and work and human potential, where in a situation here with like remote monitoring and utilizing AI as a monitor, sort of really actually expanding and elevating human potential. And I think we all have issues with bandwidth, trying to do more, and that always, I think, leads to errors and the utilization of AI to expand human potential, reduce human error, and just kind of increase and make better the patient experience. I think would be very important. Sort of going back to the original question, I think obviously AI is a really, really interesting space that we're looking to explore. That whole sort of AI and data set generation and analysis, which, for example, Thrive is really on the cutting edge of, is something that we as a firm are looking at and looking to really expound and focus on as a firm in terms of investment trends. The other thing that I think is really interesting now is that the level of technology, medical technology, has advanced so much that I think we're really at the point where curative, regenerative therapies are possible, and that's an area that I think we'll be focusing a lot of time and attention on, as opposed to therapies that are just more palliative in nature. So those, I think, are some areas that we're really excited about and looking to really spend more time focusing in on.
excellent. Thank you. So, John, same question. What do you see on the AI space? Is there any feedback that you'd like to give on that?
AI.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, AI is just a further development of what's been going on for quite a while. Medical practice has relied more and more on technology in terms of delivering service. Doctors have been using computers and databases for a long time to store ready available factual material that that they find difficult, especially outside of their specialty, to keep in their brains. But medical practice is not just information and scientific skill set. It's a humane practice. It's got. If we believe that there's such a thing as a placebo, and there certainly is, then one of the greatest placebo is the doctor-patient relationship. And if AI is going to invade in that space, then that will be a big demerit in my view. If it's simply going to be a resource that doctors can now use so that they free up more time to be with their patients and not have, like I had when I was working in the National Health Service in London, as a GP, assistant GP before I went into the pharmaceutical industry. I had maybe five minutes, 10 minutes at most with the patient. It was very hard to develop a relationship of that sort. In fact, there were some coursework to improve the doctor-patient relationship using psychodynamic therapy that I went to at the University of London. So I would argue that AI is a good on the trend of increasing efficiency in terms of knowledge base and knowledge manipulation. But if it invades and substitutes for the relationship aspects of medicine, then that's a demerit. What we do know, that going back to another point in that menu, the shortage of people that can deliver medical services that matter to a large population are very truncated. There are growing now some medical schools that are focusing on general practice and primary care. Most medical schools are focusing on specialties, and their top graduates are intellectuals rather than personality and communicators and therapists. So I argue that what's going to happen is that we'll bifurcate the medical profession, as is happening now, into those top Harvard, Yale, that are going to train doctors to be ultra specialized and ultra scientific. And then medical schools like East Carolina come up that focuses on patient relationships. And that's why I think that to solve our medical issues, we need now to begin to train up physician assistants, nurse practitioners, even RNs as alternative doctors with expanded prescription capability, always under supervision of a panel of doctors or a doctor that supervises their activity. But that is now going to be growing up to be the family doctor will probably not be a doctor themselves. They'll probably be a paraprofessional. And that they then also can use AI for their skill set storage.
Are you aware of the nurse radiologist practice growth?
Yes.
It's massive.
Yes. And I support it. I support it. I mean, there are, of course, medical practitioners that are non-doctors. Of course, they're doctors of osteopathy, DOs, not MDs. And many of them are superb family physicians. They don't focus on high-tech, specialization. They focus on patient relationship. And the growth of that kind of medical delivery, I think, is a good. And if it's in parallel with AI that they can then use the resource and also the AI that can be given to specialists to improve their particular skill sets, I'm all for it. But if it invades the relationship, no way.
They're not MDs, they're ODs, right? Osteopathic doctors. DOs or DOs, yeah, DOs.
Excellent. So how did the pandemic change trends in healthcare? And Albert, I'm going to kick this over to you to talk a little bit about investing specifically in healthcare and how maybe the pandemic shifted that, if it did.
Yeah, I don't know if it changed in sort of investing in healthcare per se, but I think it certainly exposed a lot of weak points. Certainly, a lot of issues with labor, supply chain, where you had a large concentration of production, things like PPE overseas. I think it's like 70% of all gloves and such were made in like one factory in China or something like that. But I think to that point, we started thinking about a lot of things which we never really thought about before. These types of concentrations might have been a relative good because of the reduction in costs. And now we have to think more, okay, well, we probably need to diversify these supply chain issues, within our investments, and that's become a consideration. So just, I think, more things to consider. I don't think really anything, I don't think in terms of the process it really changed anything, but just more things to worry about.
John?
Okay, so pandemic, I think, focused everyone's attention on two things. One is infectious disease, of course, and also the human relationship to infectious disease, which is the immune system, so that the vaccines became a big factor. I have a different view on the vaccines, but that's a different subject. Way back in 1906, George Bernard Shaw had a play called The Doctor's Dilemma. You could really read that play, or if you can see it, see it. It's a wonderful expose. And in it, it was quoted that one physician said, and I quote this, there is at base only one genuinely scientific treatment of all diseases, and that is to stimulate the phagocytes. Stimulates the phagocytes. Now, a phagocyte's an old term for white blood cells. And what it's saying is if you manipulate the immune system, you're going to be addressing a whole panoply of disorders, and both acute and chronic. So it stretches from all kinds of infectious disease, bacterial, viral, parasitic. It stretches all through immuno-oncology, the whole panoply of cancer. It stretches into autoimmune disease, of which there are a vast number. The most well-known are lupus, rheumatoid, psoriasis, etc. It stretches into psychiatry, because neuroscience and immunoscience are very closely related together. They come from the same embryological source. So that many psychiatric disorders are characterized by neuroinflammation, and inflammation is a manifestation of an overactive immune system. It manifests, of course, in vaccinology. It manifests in aging and tissue repair, in regeneration. That is why I view that focusing as I am now on the immunologically based companies, which have given us already some very, very important therapeutic advantages, whether it be interferon that was discovered in the 80s, well, discovered much earlier, but synthesized through biotech in the 80s, or now all these vaccines or monoclonal antibodies, or peptides and biologicals that are changing the way that we practice medicine vastly. But there's much more to go. Immune science is gaining momentum tremendous, and focusing down on that as a core discipline for my venture investing and venture company promulgation is why I'm forming this group, Immunition. So if you think about it, the immune system is the way that we maintain ourselves free of disease. Every day you're fending off cancer cells. You don't know it, but you are. Every day you're fending off viruses and bacteria that are invading your body, and you get rid of them. And this is now in concert with another trend that's majorly important in medicine, and that is that the consumer is taking charge of themselves, so that they are beginning to look at nutrition. They are beginning to look at healthy living. They're eschewing smoking. The consumption of alcohol is actually down. People are more conscious of proper living. They dialogue with their doctors in that frame. More and more doctors are becoming holistic practitioners that take into account these ideas of proper exercise, diet, sometimes supplements if you're not well, as alternatives to xenobiotic molecules, in other words, unnatural molecules. I'm very interested in the segue between nutraceutical, healthy living kinds of practices that come under healthcare delivery, and then the segue into immunological medical practice when you have to deal with actual disease where that system has failed. And that's why I'm focused on this area as an investment focus.
And we just actually probably Senegenics has been in touch with us. We'll probably be presenting it in the next 3 or 4 months to talk about what you're talking about. We'll just emphasis on wellness. Which I think a lot of concierge practices go towards as well.
There is a new company called the Wellness Company that has been formed in Florida with clues taken from the pandemic to try and fortify people's immune health as a proper way to defend themselves against attack by such things as SARS-CoV-2. There were people that got SARS-CoV-2 and didn't even know.
You guys all read Aerosmith?
Sorry?
Aerosmith? Sinclair Lewis?
Yes.
I'll pass it back over to you, Tom.
So the question is the impact of pandemic and on healthcare and investment. I had to remind myself, Shelly. The panel has made some really, I think, great points. I very much agree with comments about the need for the patient-doctor relationship. If you look at the countries and locations that had the greatest success with the lowest rates of death and morbidity from SARS-CoV-2, it was places like Singapore, which have the highest ratios of nursing and doctors. A lot of times, the best thing is early intervention of somebody who's being watched, being spoken to. It's incredibly important. And I agree also with Albert, some of these trends related to regenerative medicine are important and have been accelerated since pandemic. I think the pandemic mostly accelerated trends that or changed kind of inflection points. So certainly, we've been talking about telehealth, and there's some segments within there, such as wellness, as Dr. Abeles mentioned. Also, technologies like test and track are going to be very useful for in other applications for assembling, more data. I think number 2, data. The importance of data has been magnified by. We're all hungry for data, for good information, at many different levels. There was more data mining that was being done as a result. And I think Albert mentioned the supply chain. I think there's investment opportunities on the manufacturing and supply chain side. There's a new sense of urgency in terms of our response, and we saw some of the cracks that existed. Another crack that I think we also saw was a lot of disconnects within the fields. Medicine, healthcare, life sciences has lots of silos, and some of those began to get broken down. I think there are tremendous investment opportunities, for example, companies that bridge between the providers and tech companies and tech entrepreneurs, because they're 2 different worlds, and they don't often talk to each other well. And I think companies that have successfully, bridged that have shown that they can sell their tech products to large practice groups, or practice groups that have shown that they can innovate. And those companies that build products that are conducive to being used by large practices, there's tremendous power there in making it a combination and bridging it.
I think it's interesting in healthcare. We often forget that the patient is the same person that's using, the Uber to go somewhere and all the apps. And so they're used to that level of ease. And then they come into the healthcare system, right? And it's a little bit broken here and there. So there's lots of opportunity there. Albert, I wanted to ask you what mistakes you've seen investors make in healthcare and what you do to keep that from happening and how you focus on investments, really.
Sure. Mistakes. I mean, look, in the realm of investment, I think there's a lot of opportunity to make a lot of mistakes. Sorry. And I think one thing that investors in healthcare and life sciences specifically do is maybe getting a little too caught up in the science. Look, at the end of the day, our job as investors is to make investment decisions, and there's only so much due diligence that we can do, that we can, only so many journals that we can read to understand that. And it's important to get a good understanding of that. But I think at some point, you're just going to have to sort of call that and make that decision. And, I think the ways that you can offset that is just really looking at it from a risk management perspective. So focus on knowing what you can know, and then focus on structuring the investment the proper way. And, really from a risk management perspective, sizing is important, as well as, a good set of diversification. And I think that's really it. Don't get too caught up in the science. Some therapeutics are going to work, some are not. That's sort of the risk that you deal with. But structure and sizing for investments are actually, for us, very important. It's something that we actually focus a lot on.
Excellent. Do my other panelists have something to add here, John?
Okay, so investment criteria that are important to me in the biopharma space. First of all, management. The mark of a successful entrepreneurial management in any industry, but especially in biopharma, is that they are persistent and brave in persistence. They don't give up and leave. They're there for the long haul, and that's very important. Second, that they are adaptable, so that when things are difficult and impenetrable, they're able to adapt and shift. That's much easier in the med tech arena than it is in the biopharma. In med tech, you simply re-engineer and continue. Biopharma, if you have a big problem, you have to go back to the beginning, but that's the nature of the game. So that brings up the second thing, that if this is a risky business in biopharma, it's a very rewarding business, both financially, if you play it right, and in psychically, because you derive great psychic pleasure from doing something good in your investment. You could probably make a lot of money in parking lots, but bringing a new drug to market is something special. So what you need then is to have a portfolio approach. When you buy a major pharma company, you're buying a portfolio of essentially venture capital divisions, all developing drugs. And then 2 out of 10 will work. You have to have that consciousness in building up a biopharma portfolio, and it's what I'm going to do with my BDC that I mentioned earlier, is to get that portfolio of across the board immunological skill sets. You may have 9 projects, maybe 3 of them will work with a little bit of skill attached to the choices. But that's also very important. So persistence, adaptability, and risk mitigation by spreading across a lot of different platforms and products. I like to say that when I go to people, I say, when you invest in the medical industry, biopharma, biotech, med tech, you're taking a risk with your capital. You may make a lot of money, but even if you lose it, you're doing something good. It's almost as if you were donating your money to a hospital if you lose it all. You take the same tax write-off. as a charitable donation. So some people actually think that's a pretty neat way of framing that part of your net worth that goes into this particular format of impact investing that really changes people's lives. And that's why I'm still doing it at my tender age. It's an important thing to do, and it's fun when it works. And if you adopt those proportions I just gave you, choosing the right managements and being in a portfolio mode, you ought to do pretty well.
Excellent. So with that, I just want to have a quick lightning round to see if there's anything else my panelists would like to very quickly, 30 seconds or less, add in the healthcare investment space. And so I'm going to start with Tom.
So one, trying to pick something that maybe hasn't been mentioned that I think is really fascinating, which is sustainable bonds or social impact bonds. So these are bonds that privately finance projects generally, and they can be in healthcare. And so we all know that preventative care, diagnostics have incredible positive returns. Within the medical system, it's not always as popular because the cost savings returns are spread out and moved to another party. But with these social impact bonds, they do things like finance reduction in hospital readmission by using Meals on Wheels to include a nurse when visiting a home. And actually that particular bond is one of many examples, had incredible positive returns. There was a premium to those who did it. And so sometimes there is private, private solutions to what should be done publicly.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of companies that are looking for investment here come to family offices, and I will say the family offices, this is rapidly changing, but have a lot of scope, but not so much bandwidth. So I think what you want to impress upon them is the quality of your management team, quality of your product, and just communicate a lot and just kind of make their lives easy and kind of give them a quick beeline to what's the investment, what's the ask, and how you can basically, how they can help you.
Excellent. I think we're out of time. It looks like, or
Sean, have a closing
okay,
comment?
yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so my last thought is that a couple of years ago, biopharma was hot, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when people became much more health and sickness conscious. Right now, we've been through a real recession in biopharma valuations, along with high tech valuations in the open market. It's impacted the valuations that people have to now realize in private venture capital. So venture capital offerings are at bargain prices right now. And for those who can be counter trend in their psychology, because the open markets really should have no relevance into the biopharma venture capital space, because the realization of biopharma venture capital may be in 5-6 years' time from now. So if the mood is now taking down valuations generally, and with it venture capital for no good reason, then that's an opportune time for people to really become engaged, in my view.
Great. Well, I just want to thank the panelists, and thank you, Marty,